Hello, I'm Joel Blackford with Bethcastle Sabbath Fellowship, and I'm asking you what time it is on God's clock. This is chapter 13. We've been covering quite a few chapters here in a row. We just finished the woman from chapter 12, and now we're moving into the beasts. We'll discuss today the first beast. Is it the Antichrist, or should we call it the beast? When will he arrive? What is the image of the beast? Who is the other beast? What does the beast, why does the beast ascend to kill the two prophets? And when would this happen? What kind of wonders do they do? What is the mark of the beast? Everybody talks about that all the time. What is the mark? And what happens to those who take the mark? May we still repent is a critical question. Do we still have the free will to be able to repent and come back into a relationship with God? Let's hope so, but we'll find out more as we move along. I think you'll find this is starting out in chapter 12 and heading now forward. The story becomes very, very messianic, and we're going to show you some of those reasons. As in all cases, I like to take us back to the beginning and say, why are we even in this situation? What are the birth pangs and what's going on? What did Jesus say to bring us to this point? So this is the Olivet Discourse, and the disciples are coming to Jesus and saying, tell us, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign that you are coming? And the Olam Hazeh, the everyday world, is ending. When's the marriage supper? And he answers, watch out, don't let anyone fool you. You'll see false prophets performing great miracles, saying, I am the Messiah. Expect many to be led astray. You'll hear the noise of wars, but don't become frightened. The end is yet to come. People will fight, and nations will fight each other. Wars are always drumming, but sometimes they have a pattern. So we're going to look at the patterns and see if they fit in during this whole series. You'll see famines, earthquakes, but these are the beginning of the birth pangs. This is from Dave Williams. I'm not sure that I agree with everything that he purports, but in this case, he's got 15 prominent signs that make you believe that we're in the end times. The focus is on the Middle East. Key Muslim nations are aligning, and Israel is surrounded, and people want to annihilate them. Iran, again today, just mentioned that they want to annihilate them. Anti-Semitism is rising. Deception is rampant. There's chaos everywhere across the world. We're looking at the world saying, who's this political star that's going to rise, and which one? Will it be the beast, or as some people call him, the Antichrist? And there are many Antichrists. Keep that in mind. Extreme famines, wars, rumors of wars, epidemics, pandemics. Technology is advancing. Terrorism. There's this abnormal emphasis on sex and materialism, morality, betrayals. Morality has been in question for many, many years, since the 60s. But resistance to God's messages, and then the revivals. Will they be a remnant of godly believers, or will they be another type of a revival that would be a false revival? And there will be two. So watch for the both. Okay, so getting back to the storyline, which is the birth pangs, I want to describe this from Joel chapter 2 and Acts chapter 2, and you've heard this many, many times. After this, I will pour out my spirit on all humanity. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. Also on my male and female slaves. In those days I will pour out my spirit. I will show wonders in the sky and on the earth, blood, fire, columns of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood. These are the birth pangs before the coming of the great and terrible day of Adonai. As we've stated many, many times, but I always like to bring this up one more time, we're linear. We don't do the rapture thing. We believe that you go through. There's a break between seal 6 and seal 7. There's a break between Trump 6 and Trump 7. The bowls go fast, and we're getting close to the bowls here. You'll see them move very, very quickly. No breaks at all. And amazingly fast, in fact. But the seals open up, and those are the birth pangs. We should be noticing them. And if you check chapter 6, you'll see that I explain that about as well as I can explain it. The trumpets are, we just finished chapter 11, and we're going to describe a little bit of that in just a moment here. Anyway, don't believe in chiasms. That's just a theologian thinking that they can run some squiggly lines back and forth between chapter 1 and chapter 22, and they bunch all of these things together. So let's see, the two beasts matches up with the 144,000. I don't get it. I don't get why they did the chiastic structures that they did. We're going to dig into the Hebrew words, the Greek words. We're going to dig into the messianic thoughts behind the words and try to figure out what's going on with Revelation in a non-chiastic way, if there is such a word. We've gone through the trumpets once again. We've gone through the seventh one at chapter 11, and that was about the same time the two witnesses died, and we were able to time date stamp it based on two words that match up with that particular time. So check chapter 11 again so that you can find out that we've finished the trumpets. Once again, in chapter 11, verse 7, when they were finishing their witnessing, which is the word martyros in the Greek, martyrs, the beast coming out from the abyss will fight against them, overcome them, and kill them. And that's Revelation 11:7. So they were described as martyrs. They became martyrs, and that's what ended that time frame. And then the next trumpet blew right after that, and that was the seventh trumpet. So now we're waiting to go into the bowls at some point in time here, and that's where we are. So we're in a narrative break, as I call it here, pregnant pauses, narrative breaks. God uses these breaks all throughout His Word, throughout the Torah, as we call it, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. He likes to show you some activity and then describe it in these pregnant pauses. And so I call them narrative breaks, but it's a poetic form also, where sometimes he's rhyming things, so you could call that chiastic structure, but I'm not quite ready to go there. But it is poetry. It is Hebrew poetry, either in the way the words are set up or in the way the thoughts are set up. So watch for those things, and also realize that we're no longer in the foreground right now in terms of activities that are on the surface. We're behind the scenes. So sometimes as I go through chapter 13 here, you'll say, but why are you describing so much of the background? Well, that's what needs to set up what's happening in the foreground. Okay, the beasts. We have two beasts. We have the first beast that comes up, and he comes up from the sea. And the sea is the peoples. You'll learn that in verse 15, that the peoples are what captivate this beast and give it its power. And so he comes up, and this is an old picture of what the beast would look like. It's rather intriguing, with the 7 heads and the 10 horns, and it's rather interesting. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so let's read 13 verses 1 through 3. And I saw a beast. I argue those are kingdoms come up from the sea, the peoples, with 10 horns and 7 heads. Its horns, remember in Hebrew the word horns would be keren, strength, okay? Think of Moses when he had the horns, supposedly. That's strength, that's keren, okay, in Hebrew. Were 10 royal crowns. The word there in the Greek is diadem. So if we had a Stephanos, that'd be a winner's wreath. A diadem is a kingly crown. And so these are real worldly leaders. And they could also be diadems in heaven, too. On his heads are blasphemous names. The beast kingdoms, I'm arguing again, which I saw was like a leopard. Now, the leopard could be like Germany in this case, because Germany is known, that's their symbol for their country, but had feet like those of a bear. Okay, that's like Russia. We always know the Russian bear. And a mouth like a lion. Well, that's the United Kingdom in some ways. Now, I'm not saying that it is or it isn't. It's similar to, okay? And the dragon, that's China. China's symbol has always been the dragon, okay? And it gave its power, dunamis, which would be delegated power in the Greek. So they are given this power to go and deceive the nations, this beast, so to speak. It's thrown in great authority. Oh, I'm sorry, that's dunamis. That's dynamite in the Greek. That's dynamite, power. But then exousia rather, in the Greek, is delegated authority. So he not only has the power of dynamite, so to speak, he has delegated authority to exert that. One of the heads of the beast appeared to have received a fatal wound, but that fatal wound was healed, and the whole earth followed after the beast. Sometimes they're swallowing things too, in amazement. So this is reminiscent of the Daniel story, Antiochus IV coming into Jerusalem and slaughtering the pig on the altar. And so we need to discover some of those verses related to that, because Jesus talks about this in Matthew 24 here. And so he says, and this is Jesus on the Olivet Discourse again that we just described a little while ago. So when you see the abomination that causes devastation spoken about through the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand the allusion that it will be the time for those in Judah to escape to the hills. So people in Jerusalem get out of Dodge, okay? Because this horrible beast is coming to town, and he's going to do some kind of an abomination, very similar to what we probably saw, like the pig on the altar where he slaughters the pig. Something horrible is going to happen that's reminiscent of what Antiochus IV did. This is Daniel's version of this, of what he prophesied. He will speak words against the Most High and try to exhaust the holy ones of the Most High. He will attempt to alter the seasons and the law, and the holy ones will be handed over to him for a time, times, and half a time. That's 3.5 years. Another explanation of this is from Paul in 2 Thessalonians. He will oppose himself to everything that people call a god or make an object of worship. He will put himself above them all, because even if there's a system in place at that point in time, this beast must be the ultimate system, so to speak. So he will sit in the temple. In the Greek, it doesn't say temple. So we're going to be arguing a lot today that when you see the word temple, you have to look at what the actual Greek or Hebrew word is. It says naos. And naos would be the Holy of Holies. So think of the two words at play here. The first one is Heron, which would be the group of buildings, or the temple possibly, but they're more building-like, or buildings-like. The naos is only the Holy of Holies. And we'll see another word later on called Haykal in the Hebrew that seems to match up exactly with that. And when you go into the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament we call it, you will see that naos is used like Heron in many, many cases. So you see, so think of this as he walks into the Holy of Holies, which might be a tent over his head, and then the Holy of Holies, some kind of a sacrificial system. Okay? And he'll proclaim that he is God. And we will see that abomination in our lifetimes, more than likely. Now, Daniel's version of this is, even some of those with discernment will stumble, so that some of them will be refined, purified, and cleansed for an end yet to come. At the designated time, the king will do as he pleases. He will exalt himself and consider himself greater than any god, and he will utter monstrous blasphemies against the God of gods. He will prosper until the period of wrath is over, for what has been determined must take place. It has to occur. Okay? These are more versions of this same storyline from Jeremiah and Isaiah. So, sharpen the arrows, fill the quivers. Adonai roused the spirit of the kings of the Medes because he plans to destroy Babylon, which factors into chapters 14 a little bit and then strongly into 15, 16, 17. Babylon is strong and they're to be destroyed. This is the vengeance of Adonai, the vengeance over his temple. In the Greek, it doesn't come through in the Septuagint, okay? But in the Hebrew, it's Haykal. It would be more like a tent or a palace or some kind of maybe a temporary structure. But it's very vague in terms of what Haykal could be. It can be translated many different ways in the Greek. For some reason, this didn't get through the translation, okay? That's just how things work. Isaiah's version of this in Isaiah 66:6 of the end times is that uproar in the city, that sound from the temple, once again, naos, and in this case, the Hebrew is Haykal. So this is an exact translation of Haykal in the Hebrew being naos in the Greek Septuagint. Is the sound of Adonai repaying his foes what they deserve. Before going into labor, she gave birth. Before her pains came, she delivered a male child. So that sounds a lot like chapter 12, which you just watched, with delivering the male child. So something's going on, and something specifically is located in the naos, possibly a tent, a sacrificial system. So I would look for another man-made temple, so to speak. Yes, I know that Orthodox Jews worldwide pray for that 3 times a day for a temple to be built. It sounds like it's a Haykal and a naos, which would be just the Holy of Holies. Look, I am sending my messenger to clear the way before me, and the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple. This is a literal translation from Malachi of naos and Haykal. It says Haykal in the Hebrew, but in the Septuagint it does say naos. Yes, the messenger of the covenant, that is the Messiah. There's no doubt about that. He is the messenger of the Brit, we'll call it the covenant, in whom you take such delight. Look, here he comes. So that's when he's returning, says Adonai Tezvaot. So he is the Lord of armies. But who can endure the day when he comes? Who can stand when he appears? For he will be like a refiner's fire, like a soap maker's lye. Okay? And then we'll continue on. That's 3:1 and 2, and then 4 through 5. Remember the Torah of Moses. So when these horrible things are occurring to you during this time of the beast and the other beast that comes up, as we describe both of them during this chapter, remember the Torah of Moses, as Malachi points out at the end of his book, and that's the end of your Old Testament. Moshe, my servant, who I enjoined on him at Horeb the mountain, the laws, that is the word hukim. You're going to see that pop up in Revelation 19:8. So just be aware, that is a regulation, a rule that you really, it's beyond human understanding, okay? And so you would want to keep those because God said keep those. There are certain things that you do that you just know are right, and they're hukim in the Hebrew. And so you want to be aware of those, that this is starting to become a very messianic book as we move through chapters 12 and forward. And the rulings, that would be the Hebrew word mishpatim, which is found in Revelation 9 times, which is kind of a consistency there. You have to keep the laws, the rulings. So imagine that you have to stop at that stoplight, okay? Otherwise the judge, in this case the mishpatim, the judges, would judge you for running the stoplight, okay? So the rulings are consistent throughout life, and the rulings work in the Bible too, and they happen 9 times in Revelation, which means that you know that you have to keep these laws, so to speak, for all Israel. And we're spiritual Israel too, so you can't say it's just for Israel, not for us. We're spiritual Israel. We're grafted in too. So look, I will send you Eliyahu the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of Adonai. So that is the end, basically, of the Old Testament. That is the last of the Hebrew Scriptures that then leads up to that time frame of Daniel and these prophecies about the 10 horns, the 7 heads, and other things like that. This is rather an intriguing picture that kind of shows people worshiping the beast, so to speak. Okay? All right, continuing on, Revelation 13. Horns or heads? Let's talk about who's worshiping what and who. They worship the dragon. The Satan, that is who the dragon is. And by the way, I say the Satan rather than just Satan because he is the adversary. That's what Satan means. Because he had given his authority to the beast, kingdom, I presume, and they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast? That in Hebrew would sound like Mika Mocha, and we'll describe that in just a little bit, but it sounds like Michael too. Michael sounds like Mika Mocha. Okay, so that is the phrase of who is like God. Who is like the beast. Very similar there. So we'll describe that in the next slide. Who can fight against it? The Antichrist. His kingdom, maybe, okay, was given a mouth speaking arrogant blasphemies, and was given authority to act for 42 months. Is that the first half or the second half? I would argue the second half. Okay, that's just my point, and we'll see if it bears fruit. So it opened its mouth in blasphemies against God to insult his name and his Shekinah, which would be his glory, and those living in heaven. Okay, so let's cover the Michael topic and the phrase that we just heard. Who is like the Lord? Who is like our God? Mika Mocha, by Elim, Adonai. That's a phrase that we say all the time. Who is like our God? No one, nothing. So who is like the God or the beast? So when we read it in Exodus, it is, who is like you? Mika Mocha, Adonai, by Elim, Adonai. Okay, and who among the mighty? Who is like you, sublime in holiness, awesome in praises, working wonders? You reached out with your right hand, the earth swallowed them. So this is read constantly by Orthodox Jews, probably by many Jews, and Messianics. Mika Mocha Adonai, Mika Mocha by Elim Adonai. And so we sing this because we want to remember that only God is our Lord God. Okay? So the beast should remind you of Michael, and I argue that it's possible that the beast's name, the Antichrist name, is actually Michael. But this is why it's also intriguing. In Daniel, he cites it this way. At this time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found in the book, written in that book, the book of life, will be delivered. Okay, so let's describe it this way. When we have Yeshua brought to trial, so to speak, and then Pilate says, okay, we have 2 guys. We have Yeshua ben Anan oh goodness, I'm having problems. Abba, Bar Abbas, okay? Abba, Abbas, so that would be the father. So he's probably a son of a high priest or someone very important, a father-like figure, okay? Or Yeshua ben Yosef, that would be our Messiah. And he says, which one do you want? And so Bar Abba or Bar Yosef. And so they chose Bar Abba in this case. I'm arguing that it's possible that in the end times, your beast will be Michael and your prince will be Michael, and there will be a battle. And it seems to be, these name things pop up all the time. So think of Mika Mocha when you think of Michael. Now, let's discuss the time frames and give you one more note on that. The 42 months generally are the first half or the second half of the Great Tribulation, the 3.5 years. Sometimes it's called a time, times, and a half a time. Sometimes it's called 1,260 days, but I argue that those days are usually specific and unique and are tied into some time frame that probably isn't exactly aligning with the 42 months. So just keep in mind things might overlap, but we generally can work things out in the end. Okay, getting back to Daniel 7, the 4 beasts, we need to just dig into them a little bit more so you can see the backstory, the background of what's happening. So Daniel explains it this way, and I explain it. I'm a futurist. We'll describe that more in just a moment. I believe then and now that this happens 2 times, okay? So Daniel describes it. I had a vision at night. I saw before me the 4 winds of the sky breaking out over the great sea, the peoples again. Okay? And 4 huge animals came up out of the sea, the peoples, each different from the others. The first was a lion. That's Babylon, Great Britain. Okay? They match up. Babylon is a lion. There's no doubt about it. It's described in Daniel. But it's also Great Britain. The eagle's wings. That's Nebuchadnezzar when he has that mind problem and he grows hair like feathers. Okay, that's the eagle's wings for him, but that's also America being broken off of Babylon as it stood up. And as I watched, its wings were plucked off. It's an American Revolution, and it was lifted off the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and Britain was, and they ruled the world. The sun never set on the British Empire for a period of time there. And the human heart was given to it, and they did spread the good news for many, many years until they turned on the Jews. Then there was another. In the Hebrew, that's acharei. And so what you want to see is a pattern of 4 of these lining up after each one of these animals. And if you could see it in my Hebrew text, you'd see it almost in a cross format, which is very intriguing. So after each one of these, there is this word of, you'll see it again. The acharei is a subliminal message to you that says, you're going to see this in the end times too, in the acharith ha-yomim, which is the end of days. Okay? And then the second one, the bear, Medo-Persia, no doubt about it, and Russia too. Okay, it raised itself up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, get up and gorge yourself with flesh. After this, I looked, and there was another, acharei again. That was the leopard. That's Greece. There's no doubt about that. But it's also Germany with 4 birds' wings. That's kind of France-like. I don't know what that means. On its sides, and the animal had 4 heads, and it was given power to rule from Daniel. Continuing on with Daniel. Then atar, which is very similar to acharei, but it's not the Hebrew. I'm sorry, I indicated it that way. It's actually the Hebrew script, which is actually Aramaic. It's atar, but it's very similar. Okay, and I looked in the night visions, and there before me was the 4th animal. That's Rome, the final kingdom, and we don't really know what the final kingdom is, and we'll discuss that. Dreadful, horrible, extremely strong, and with a great iron teeth. It devoured, crushed, and stamped its feet on what was left. It was different from all the animals that had gone before it, and it had 10 horns. And while I was considering the horns, there's that final acharei, horn sprang up from among them, a little one before, and this is that beast, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. In this horn were eyes like a human, eyes, and mouth speaking arrogantly. It's the beast. As I watched, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient One took his seat, the judgment seat. His clothing was white as snow, and his hair on his head was pure wool. His throne was fiery flames and wheels of burning fire. That's Daniel. So we finish out that. Now we need to take a little time out here and kind of describe what I am and what I'm preaching, so to speak. Futurism versus preterism versus partial preterism. I'm a futurist. I see double and triple fulfillments of prophecy, like 2 or 3 witnesses. And we've experienced 1 fulfillment, but there are yet more to come. It could happen 2 or 3 times. Preterists are going to say everything happened by the time Antiochus number 4 completed his work from 168 to 164 BC. The problem is they're right too, but that's why it's going to happen again. So I have a confirmation bias. There's no doubt about it. I truly believe that Yeshua returns. But they have a confirmation bias because they want to play it squishy. And so if things happen, well, it happened to happen, this happened. But sooner or later, you play that squishy center of partial preterism, and it's going to fail because things happen time and time again. History doesn't repeat, it rhymes. Okay, let's get back into Daniel and finish it out then from chapter 7. the fourth animal. This is what he said. The fourth animal will be Rome, the fourth kingdom on earth, and it will be different from all the other kingdoms. It will devour the whole earth, trample it down, and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of the kingdom, 10 kings will arise. You're seeing that in Revelation 13, aren't you? The 10 kings. And yet another Acharon will arise, Acharaihan, which is, these words are popping up, which makes you realize you're going to see these people again. This is God giving you these code words to know that something else is going to happen. Now, he will be different from the earlier ones. He will put down 3 kings. He will speak words against the Most High and try to exhaust the holy ones of the Most High. He will attempt to alter the seasons and the law. In the Aramaic, I can't prove it through to the Torah, but it's real close. The holy ones and the holy ones, and he will be handed over to him for a time, times, half a time, 3.5 years. But when the heavenly court, the dean, in the word, so the word Dan, so if you have a friend named Dan, just think he's the judgment guy. It's court, dean in this case, but it means judgment. Goes into session, he will be stripped of his rulership, he will be consumed and completely destroyed. Then the kingdom, the rulership, and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the Most High, the holy people. Their kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all their rulers will serve and obey them. Okay, that's Daniel, but we also need to see another vision of Daniel. There's a lot of time spent in the background with Daniel as he sets up these events for the end times. And we need to see this picture again. We've already read it once, but I want you to see it more in context now throughout Daniel. So this is about the beast. So even some of those with discernment will stumble, so that some of them will be refined, purified, and cleansed for an end yet to come at the designated time. That's like saying the Moedim, the festivals, at the certain festivals that need to be fulfilled. The king, the beast, you could call him, or the Antichrist, some people call him, will do as he pleases. He will exalt himself and consider himself greater than any god. He will utter monstrous blasphemies against the God of gods. He will prosper only until the period of wrath is over. That, in the Hebrew, you can think of it as kala, which is the Hebrew word, but bride. It's like saying the bride. Until the bride, okay? For what has been determined must take place. Getting back into Revelation now, you've seen some of the backstory. Why and when? Let's discuss it. The beast was allowed to make war on God's holy people and defeat them. This causes something that I call the second Exodus. After that 7th trumpet, where horrible things happen, and everyone in Jerusalem and Israel needs to get out quickly because it's going to get ugly. He has bloodlust for people. And you'll see when we get into later chapters here that fully 1/3 of the people survive and 2/3 are wiped out. It's going to be horrific, and no one really wants to talk about it. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation, everything. Everyone living on the earth will worship it, except those whose names are written in the book of life belonging to the Lamb. And I wanted to bring this with just because it's kind of fun for me to have some props. So the word in the Greek is lambkin. So it's not even a big burly lamb. It's describing Yeshua, our lamb, as more of a lambkin, okay? And slaughtered before the world was founded. So he was slaughtered way before anything else happened. And so that's what sets up this final battle and these raging issues that we're going to be seeing with the beast. And I wanted to bring my other prop with, which is, this is my beast prop. And these props I've been using for so many years. So basically the beast shows up, and this is the first beast that we're talking about that comes up from the peoples. But Yeshua the Lamb does slaughter the beast. And so, you know, if we have a choice between listening to one or the other, obviously we listen to the Lamb. At this point in time in Revelation, you're going to see a lot of general killing. The sword goes back from the Ramphia sword, which we've shown you before, which is a long, it's a spiritual sword. It's a discerning type of a sword, to just a general short killing sword. And I don't happen to have it with me right now, but you've seen it in some of the other videos. Getting back into 13:10, then, we're waiting for the living water to regenerate us. If anyone is meant for captivity, into captivity, which is prison camps for believers, he goes. If anyone is to be killed with the sword, Makira, as I mentioned, with the sword, Makira again, he was to be killed. So sometimes he switches between the swords. In a chapter 6, he switches between the two, and it has great meaning. Okay? He is to be killed. You're not killed for denying Yeshua. You're killed, you know, you're killed if you accept and keep the Master, our Messiah. This is when God's holy people, Who is that? These are people that must persevere. In the Greek, that's hupomone. And in the Hebrew, that's mikveh, which is interesting. It's kind of a combination between tikva, which is hope, and mikvah, which would be water baptism. So it's like a hope of water, washings, baptisms. It's the hope of regeneration. You know what it means in a spiritual sense. You know what a baptism means. It's the regeneration. And then also trust. And so you'll see that these people are being tested at this point in time, and they're told to persevere, which is like mikvahs of hope, okay, and trust. But that doesn't relate very well to a pre-trib rapture, because why would you need to do that if you've already rejected God and all those people were raptured out? So it doesn't add up, does it? Okay, continuing on, we're going to describe the mikvah, or the mikveh word that we just described, so that you'll know hupomone also in the Greek. Okay, therefore, leaving behind the initial lessons, I call those the elementary principles, and so does a famous scholar in town here, about the Messiah, let us go on to maturity. Okay, so this is where we're growing in faith, not laying, again, the foundation of, one, we have to work on repentance, turning from works, okay, that lead to death. 2, faith, trusting God, okay. 3, instruction about washings, baptisms, mikveh, mikvah, tikva, hope, okay, and tikva. And then the next one is 4, smika. Smika is interesting. That's the laying on of hands, okay? And so that is conferring your blessings onto people. That's blessing through the laying on of hands. It really has always been that. And then the resurrection of the dead is number 5, and number 6 is eternal judgment or punishment, okay? And so, and God willing, this is what we will do for when people have once been enlightened and tasted the heavenly gift, become sharers in the God Spirit, Ruach HaKodesh. Okay, so we know that during the time when it gets to be the worst in chapter 13, you'll see that these mikvahs, these mikvehs in the Hebrew there, are critical. But all of these other things, these are the 6 elementary principles from Hebrews 6, 1 through 4. So you know that these things are critical. And so I think I'll take the beast off for the moment here. This will be the time when you need those things the most. Stern explains it this way, and David Stern is a top scholar in Messianic thought. It's the foundation issue. 2 pairs of topics comprise the instruction to that a baby believer needs after coming to faith. The first pair deals with this world, and the second with the world to come. And Shaul, Paul, the Apostle Paul, in 1 Corinthians 3:1, our author believes his readers do not need more milk. Do you remember that? You don't need any more milk in this case, in Hebrews, but in that case, he says, oh, you need more milk. So he assumes they understood the 6 basic doctrines, are prepared to go on to maturity, so he intends to explain the doctrine of Yeshua's high priesthood and sacrifice, and is satisfied that he heed not lay again the foundation. Okay? So for you, once you're moving along, you would understand those 6 points. And if you want a good book on that, I could recommend it. So please hit me on the YouTube line, and I'll recommend that book to you on the elementary principles. Okay. Are we at this horrific time? No. But keep in mind, as we describe all of these pregnant birth pangs and the bride issues and all these other things, that God is recommending, come my people, the brides, enter your rooms, the bridal chambers, and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until the wrath is past. For see, Adonai emerges from his place to punish those on earth for their sin. Then the earth will reveal the blood shed on it and no longer conceal its slain. So we're going to take a break right now. I wanted you to know that. And so I will come back with part B of chapter 13 in just a moment.